Welcome to another edition of the Plan Well podcast, hosted by owner and attorney of Cary Estate Planning, Paul Yokovitis.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This is episode 3 of the Plan Well podcast, and this is actually our first interview episode, and we're so lucky to have with us today Chris Walsh from Keystone Financial Partners in Cary. Chris is a financial planner. He specializes in overall wealth management and planning for the overall comprehensive needs of his clients, not just asset growth. He's been working with Keystone Financial Partners for 10 years, ever since he relocated from the state of New York to this great area of the triangle we call Cary. And he's been working with a lot of our clients. We share a lot of clients with Chris and his team, and they've been amazing on follow-up, on direct coordination with our team to make sure that our estate planning is jiving with their financial planning. And so as our first interview, I could think of no one better than Chris to be on to share with us a little bit of what he does and a little bit more depth, a little bit more about who he is and what makes him tick. And then some things, maybe some pointers or overall, tidbits about what we can be doing as professionals and as individuals in our new reality during and post-COVID. So, Chris, welcome. Obviously, if you want to plug any holes that I may have left in the introduction, go for it. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Paul. I'm really happy to be here. Unlike a lot of people, I really did know exactly what I wanted to do from a very young age. I started dabbling in stocks with my dad when I was probably preteen. And so it was something that I was always really fascinated with. And, I got into the almost ready for college time period. And my dad was always a do-it-yourself investor, like a lot of people are. Mm-hmm. And I saw the result of the tech bubble burst, 9/11, and that recession. And I saw what it did to him. And I thought to myself, man, I want to be there for someone, helping them, guide them through that exact situation. And it was from that moment on that I was committed to this profession. And so you fast forward 14 years and here I am today still doing that exact same thing. And, what I find really rewarding about this profession is the impact that we have on individuals' lives, and all walks, right? We have clients that are younger that are just starting families or, planning for kids' educations. And we have clients that are approaching retirement and they're really just trying to make sure that they are doing everything they need to be doing to make sure that they're going to have a successful retirement. And so it's really rewarding to see those plans come to fruition and to see people succeed in what their ultimate goals are. So that's a little bit about me. You've gotten to know me over the past few years. I'm pretty down to earth, but my goal is just to help as many people as I possibly can. So
you brought up a really good point that your dad was sort of a DIY planner and that you sort of dabbled in it in sort of that, fictional environment. I think a lot of us, anybody who really took like a finance class in high school or we called it senior accounting or senior living in high school, where it was basically like, here's how you do adulting. You sort of dabble with those stock market simulators and that kind of thing. But obviously in our market, we see so many tech entrepreneurs and even like engineers and whatnot that are just more DIY inclined. And that sort of pervades everything, even investing. So what sort of limitations do you think that imposes on the overall success of someone's financial plan by sort of taking it themselves and running with it?
Yeah, so the big problem with doing it yourself is there's certainly a lot of good resources out there. There's a lot of good materials that you can read up on, podcasts that you can listen to that can coach you up enough to be able to do it yourself. Where I find that most people struggle on the DIY path is when things aren't going so smooth in the market. A great point is what just happened here over the last 6 weeks or so. Unexpected, seriously, a large scale decline. And emotions come into play when it's your money. And when you're a do-it-yourselfer, you're the only one behind the wheel of that car. And so what I see is a lot of times people react to the emotions of what's happening to their money, and they typically are making mistakes, trying to avoid the big decline, or they end up selling at the bottom and then they wait it back up and they buy at the top. So I think that having an advisor, having a partner, whether they're in control of your assets or they're just on the side giving you advice, can help you navigate some of those challenges. And I think that's where being a partner or coming into somebody's financial world and helping guide them to avoid some of those mistakes that are commonly made.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Experience is a significant factor there. And what we will normally, tell clients on the estate planning side, or when we're sort of, met with the do-it-yourself proposition, is you simply don't know what you don't know. So you don't really know what tools are at your disposal. And I think that's even more so with financial advising is, you have like large cap, mid cap, small cap, you have foreign markets, you've got ETFs, index funds, all these different things that people think, oh, well, I'll just put everything in this mutual fund and everything will be fine. I'll put it on red and let it ride. Right. And you just don't have any exposure to any other options. And then, we sort of see, just like in estate planning, with financial planning, everything kind of crumbles or has a tendency to fall apart in periods of transition and volatility. And we see that a lot, unfortunately, when it's too late. If somebody did their own will and they passed, and then there's no going back and plugging the gaps. And now you're probably seeing that, I would imagine, with people's investment portfolios. If they didn't have advice, didn't have anybody sort of calming the storm and easing their anxieties about this sort of market volatility, they may be sort of sitting there with a vastly different financial trajectory after all this.
Yeah, and I think the thing is there's a lot of components to investing, and investments are the vehicle, right? That's how you get from point A to point B. But you also need a plan behind the investments. There has to be some cohesiveness between what you're doing on the investment side and what you're trying to accomplish from a goal perspective. And so when you have a financial advisor, we build plans for people, and it's really helpful. And one of the things we did as a result of the decline from COVID was we went back and we updated almost every single financial plan we had for clients, just so that way we could reach out and say, hey, despite this decline, your plan, your goals, the things that we are working towards are still on track. We're still headed in the right direction. And so what that does is, emotionally, you might be saying, wow, I've lost $200,000, $500,000, whatever the dollar figure is. It's a big dollar figure.
Yeah.
But when you know that your plan, your goals, the things that you're trying to accomplish 10, 15, 30 years out are still on track despite that decline, it gives you a little bit more power to stay in your seat and not do something that might cause you harm that can't be corrected.
Sure. And I think you used probably one of the most significant words in those statements is the word goal. And I think we often see too many times as clients who they're only focused on asset growth. They're not looking at, their goals in retirement, their goals while they're still working. Nothing is really surrounding, a tangible thing that they're trying to accomplish. It's just sort of like, let's amass the most amount of money that we possibly can, and then everything else just sort of falls into place, which obviously is misguided, right?
Absolutely. And what I see in that case is a lot of times people are taking more risk than they actually need to. If you only need to be 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds to achieve everything in life that you want to, then why take the risk of a portfolio that has 80% stocks?
Yeah.
It's like trying to hit a home run when all you need to hit is singles.
Right.
That's a good point. And so that's where I think the benefit of really working with somebody, whether, like I said, whether they're managing your assets or just in more of a coaching relationship, it's someone to help you, guide you, almost keep you safe from yourself in a way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So with that sort of thing in mind, obviously the guiding, the coaching, the instruction and education, what sort of things or what changes are you seeing in your practice during COVID or maybe that you can forecast post-COVID? And probably to it may be appropriate to date stamp this. Today is May 5th, so we're still in it. And it looks like the executive order for our stay home order will expire at the end of this week. But obviously, we're sort of opening a new reality at this point. So what are you seeing in your practice?
Yeah, certainly going to be a new normal. I don't know that we're ever going to go back to the old way things were. It kind of reminds me very much like 9/11 in a way. Nothing was really the same after 9/11. Everything sort of changed the way we viewed security, and I kind of feel that's how we're going to be during this. Like many people, I feel fortunate that we've been able to operate and work remotely. Our clients have embraced the virtual meetings, and so from that perspective, I feel blessed. I feel fortunate. I think there's a difference between, declines aren't new, right?
Right.
Declines happen every single year. I think one of my favorite stats actually comes from JP Morgan, and the average intra-year decline going back over the last 40 years has been 13.8% per year. So declines aren't really a new thing. We know they happen. They happen almost every single year. But it's different this time because of the virus. It feels different because of the virus. There's no doubt in my mind that this is going to have some significant economic impact, right? I'm starting to see it with some of my young professional clients. We've had several clients who have had salary reductions, 15, 20, as much as 30% salary reductions.
Yeah.
And we've also seen bonuses start that, not going to be getting my bonus this year. Other things, even more severe layoffs. So there's economic impact that's coming. For us, it shifts more to, okay, let's pause on the long-term planning. Let's try to navigate the short-term storm. What do we need to do to make sure that we can weather this thing and minimize the damage as much as possible? And, that's, okay, maybe that's cutting back on some extra spending. It might be reducing temporarily, if need be, some savings, some ongoing saving strategies. If that's what we have to do to avoid someone going into debt, then that's what we're going to do. But that's where the planning part comes into place. And I think for us, we have a lot of older clients, and it's tough being, for you and I, we can still kind of get out about a little bit, but for them, they're very much stuck in place and isolated. And when you're 75, 80 years old, isolated either by yourself or maybe with your spouse, it becomes lonely. So we've just tried to do a lot of proactive calls out to them just to, hey, how are you doing? Is there anything you need? Can we bring you anything? And I think a lot of clients have enjoyed that, but it's certainly going to change the way we operate going forward. I know it's changed the way you've had to operate your practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we adapt and we adjust, and hopefully we come out of this thing maybe better. It's still yet to be seen.
Yeah, it seems like in these sorts of weird times, obviously you're right. This is an anomaly. It's different, this time around. But it seems like what you said about the intra-year dips, that seems to happen pretty much every October or around there, right? It seems to be that people who are with advisors who have sort of, somebody coaching them through that, or sort of saying, this is what we normally see in the fall, so expect a dip and then it'll be okay because it'll come right back up. These sort of, short-term reductions, I think people end up having sort of a recency bias where it's like, oh, we're in it and it's so terrible right now. The world is almost like a Chicken Little thing. The sky's falling. Yep. But if they were to actually look back at, 2009, everything came back. And it's not like the market fell and never recovered. Markets recover. It's what they do, right? We have, upward long-term trajectories. It's just that so many people get caught in that middle zone. Yeah. And I think that's where, working with somebody like you and Keystone is that it's the coaching. It's the getting past the anxiety, walking them off the ledge, and just making sure that they're focused not on the short term or in the suck, so to speak, but more so retirement, long term, 10 years, 20 years, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and the second part of that stat is of the 40-year time period, 30 of those 40 years finished positive,
Right.
despite that intra-year decline.
Mm-hmm.
So again, investing is not a sprint. It's certainly a marathon.
Yeah.
It takes discipline, and there you have to, I think, as an investor, you have to realize there are going to be periods of time where your accounts are going to be down. The market doesn't just go up. And,
For sure.
you know, we've had a pretty good run. We've had a pretty nice run over the last 10 years or so. This is the first time where we've had a long period of sustained volatility and sort of a negative market environment. And again, you layer on top of that the virus, it scares people. And the media certainly doesn't help that.
Right.
They definitely drive that fear and panic. That's how they make money. And so our job is to be that calming voice that can keep you in your seat. And again, I like I don't know if I've shared this analogy with you. You've probably heard it before. It's a pretty popular analogy, but investing is very much like riding a roller coaster. When you step foot on a roller coaster, you go through all sorts of emotions.
Yeah.
There's the excitement, there's the anxiousness, there's the fear as you reach the top, there's sheer panic as you're like, oh my God, is this thing going to end? And that's investing. It really does line up very nicely. And I always say to clients, I said, the only way I know of that you can get hurt or killed on a roller coaster is by getting out of your seat in the middle of the ride. And the same can really be said for investing.
No, that's a great analogy. I think that definitely hits that point home. What are you seeing? Obviously, you've been practicing for a very long time. What are you seeing that, whether this is from new clients or people that you've met with who never became clients, that just the average family is just missing, or that they should remember generally, key high-level points of financial planning?
Yeah. So I'm a big preacher, big believer. These tips, I guess, really apply regardless of the market timing, right?
Yeah.
What I've learned over the last 14 years is that there are things that we can control and there are things that we cannot control. We can't control what the market does on the day-to-day or week-to-week or even year-to-year in some cases. And so by focusing on that, we're essentially trying to win at something we can't win at.
Right.
And so really it's more of a shift in mindset. I try to get clients to focus on the things that they can control. And those are important things like risk. Are you in the proper portfolio for your risk and for your goals? If you are somebody that gets really nervous about market dips or market corrections, you probably shouldn't be in a portfolio that has 90% stock and 10% bonds, right? It's probably not an appropriate allocation. So it's important that you manage your risk within your portfolio. And the second piece of that, something I see a lot of do-it-yourselfers miss, is the part about rebalancing, right? If you leave a portfolio alone and you don't touch it, over time, it's going to gradually become more aggressive than what your intention was.
Yeah.
And so by rebalancing, you're bringing that portfolio back to that targeted allocation, whether it's 60-40, 70-30, whatever it might be. This way, when we do have declines, you're in the proper portfolio for your risk, which hopefully allows you to stay in your seat.
Yeah.
The second thing I think is diversification. You you mentioned it before, not putting all of your eggs in one basket. There are a lot of different options out there. There's, like you said, U.S., international, emerging markets. There's real estate. There's large cap growth, large cap value, mid cap, small, all these different vehicles. And so by trying to target maybe just one, you're essentially putting you're gambling at, is this the one that's going to hit the home run? And
Right.
So being properly diversified is going to help you over the long run. It's going to help smooth out that ride. Again, going back to hopefully helping you stay in your seat when things do get volatile. Cost is another thing that we can control, right? We can't control what the market's going to do tomorrow, or what, because again, the market's affected by a lot of different things. A tweet can throw the market up or down, right? And
Especially
so,
these days, right?
yeah, I mean, we've seen that happen a number of times. And so, we focus on things like cost, using low cost investment vehicles, or as low of cost as possible, because the lower the cost, the more money that stays in your portfolio growing for you. And the other part to that is tax efficiency, right? I mean, if you're somebody that needs tax efficiency, making sure we're focusing on investments that are going to do that for you. And then the last thing that you can control is behavior, what you do and how you react to these things. My biggest advice to most people is to turn off the news, turn off the media, because they want you to focus on what's happening today or tomorrow. And really what happens today or tomorrow in the stock market has very little impact on the long-term future of your success. By you not doing anything and you just sticking to the plan that you have in place, you're really setting yourself up for that ultimate goal. I mean, there's going to be challenges, right? We face challenges every day. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs at us, but if you stick to that plan and you follow it through and you ignore a lot of the noise, you're setting yourself up for what I would consider to be the best course for success.
Yeah. I think in that way, there's a lot of commonality with like a long-term diet or a lifestyle change. Like you can control 100% of what you put in your mouth, but it's also not a situation where perfection is the only way. Just like we're never going to always have up markets. You're never going to be 100% perfect on the diet, but it's the resilience of you as a diet participant or as an investor to weather that storm of, the cheat meal, i.e. the correction or the dip, that gets you through. You don't fall off the rails, you stay right on, right? And great points. And obviously, we talk about risk tolerance a lot on the estate planning side. Obviously, it's even more significant on the financial side. But a key point that you're hitting there, though, is that changes over time. And if you don't know how to reallocate based on your shifting risk tolerance, then you're going to end up potentially crashing and burning with too much aggression on the strategy, or maybe not enough risk on in the early years, right?
It's surprising to me I work with the two demographics, and I will a lot of times see younger professionals in very conservative portfolios, and you ask yourself, well, why is that? And you and I, our investing time period, we've seen some pretty rough things happen in a short period of time. 2001, 2002, then we had the 08, 09, and then here we are again dealing with this. So I think younger investors there's a sense of hesitation because of what they've seen, and that's where I think coaching can come into play. Is it can help you say, okay, here are my fears, but here's how they actually translate into my plan, and maybe I need to take more risk. And usually once people see what that means for the success of their long-term plan, like I said earlier, that's when they can sort of put some of those emotions to the side and follow that plan.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think with our generation, those fears end up in like a general sense, like they saw 09 and the market fall out, and that's just a general apprehension to participate in an equities, strategy. But then you've got those experiential fears. That's like they had a mom or dad, or maybe both, that were, all into maybe an automotive pension or a state-based pension, and the pension went away, or it was no longer guaranteed. And they see this, those sort of experiential, fears are so much further ingrained, and they won't go away if you don't have coaching. Like that's sort of like, somebody experiencing trauma at a young age and then never getting therapy for it. Like if you don't have, somebody working on unwinding that experiential fear, you're never going to get past it. But you're also going to be in a situation where, unfortunately, people could take advantage of that fear and use that fear, to their own advantage. We see that all the time with estate planning, is people who, maybe their parents had a terrible probate. And so their whiplash, sort of decision based on that is to avoid probate at all costs. Right. So that sort of fear-based motivation is powerful to a salesperson. It's incredible how fear can really drive the ship for a lot of people's decision making.
Yeah, we're human at the core, right? And
Yeah.
our emotions do dictate a lot of how we behave and how we react. So absolutely.
Now, Chris, so you're a CFP, which is a certified financial planner. Do you want to explain a little bit what that is, what it means, and why it's important?
Yeah. So certified financial planner is a designation that individuals like myself can pursue. I think for me, I always felt like it was the gold standard in the financial planning world for a number of reasons. We have very strict ethical requirements that we have to follow that are dictated by the CFP board. Just like you as an attorney, right? There are things that you have to follow and things that you have to do for your clients. It's very similar to a CFP. We're held to a higher standard.
And that's above like what FINRA requires or what the SEC requires, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And the other thing too is there's experience requirements. So typically when you're working with the CFP, it's not somebody that is just decided to do this one day because they were a do-it-yourselfer and figured, hey, I could maybe make some money doing this for other people. So there's experience requirements. We also have ongoing continuing education that we have to participate every single year to keep our CFP going, to be able to renew it. And so to me, it tells you that you're working with somebody that is dedicated to the profession and to learn, because things change, right? We just had 2 major law changes in a 3-month period, the Secure Act followed up by the CARES Act. I mean, so, we're doing continuing education, webinars, classes on these types of things. So that way we're bringing the newest and most current information to our clients. And so there's a combination that, and not to mention the test itself is extremely difficult. So probably the hardest test I've had to take. And I just think for me, it represents somebody that is committed to financial planning and doing what is in the best interest of the client at all times. And really, that's how I see planning. My goal at the end of the day has always been to do what I can to help that person. And everybody's different, right? Everyone's goals are different. Everyone's plans are different. Their finances are different. But my job is to treat each one like an individual and do my best to help guide them on whatever their path ultimately is. So I think for me, a CFP is a great designation to search out if you're looking for a financial advisor.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think a lot of people see, the CFP commercials and stuff like that, but don't fully understand what it means or didn't previously. So thank you for that explanation. It makes a lot of sense. Now, within Keystone Financial Partners, you have established sort of a separate practice that you call WealthWise, which seems to line up pretty well with our secondary practice called PlanWell. And so do you want to take a minute to sort of describe what that is and how it differs from the traditional advisory practice?
Absolutely. Yeah, WealthWise came about simply because there's a void in the financial planning world. Financial planning in my mind is geared towards those that have already established wealth or are fairly far along. And you get that by the way they charge, right? Most firms that practice comprehensive financial planning or wealth management have asset minimums. And typically those asset minimums they can start at $500,000, they can go to $1 million or more. And so if you're a young professional that has really good income, you can't usually get that level of advice because you don't have the assets to get in the door. And so WealthWise was...
By that, you mean asset, like liquid assets under management, right? We're not talking about the equity in the home or the life insurance or anything like that.
Correct. We're talking about assets to be managed. Most firms, most of your typical high-end wealth management firms are looking probably for at least $500,000 of investable assets. So money that you would turn over to them and they would manage in order to access their comprehensive wealth management platform. And so to me, I said, if I wasn't in this profession, what would my options be? And I didn't like my choices. It really was go out and become a do-it-yourselfer, Google, podcasts, read books, which again, you can get pretty far, but you can only get so far. And then the other option typically is more of your commission-based world where I'm working with somebody and they're selling me a product.
Right.
Whether I need that product or not, that's to be determined. But I wasn't comfortable with that. And I said, how can we do this better? And that's where WealthWise came into play. And so with WealthWise, we utilize all of the same financial planning strategies, tactics, software, technology to deliver financial planning advice, but we do it with a subscription model. So we don't need assets under management to work with clients that are under the WealthWise platform. We can work with anybody. If somebody is really wanting to invest in their personal wealth growth, and from a comprehensive perspective, because we're not just focusing on investments.
Yeah.
I'm focusing on working with individuals like yourself. I want my clients to have an estate plan in place. I want that estate plan to be coordinated. A lot of the WealthWise clients, they have young kids. And so talking to them about how do you protect those young kids, whether it is having life insurance or having the estate plan, all of these things come into play. And so it really is that coaching program for a young professional to really get things on track. And my goal was always to, a lot of clients, our older clients have already reached that status. They're that millionaire next door. And so I always said, I'd love to be able to help build more millionaire next doors just at younger ages. And we can do that just by really great planning from a younger age. And so that's the start of WealthWise. And I think it's picked up traction because there's not a lot of options, like I said earlier, for young professionals to get that kind of advice.
That's great. So you're talking about, giving advice on stuff that wouldn't traditionally be part of the AUM model anyway, like a 401k, for instance. You can't take that under management because it's already in an employer plan. So you're talking about doing basically full scope fiduciary planning on a subscription model.
Yeah, we look at, I want to make sure that your 401k is properly allocated. You're using the right risk, allocation, stock to bond weighting. I'm looking at especially in this area, there's a lot of great companies that have really great benefit packages. And what I find is a lot of people are underutilizing the benefits that they're offered through their employers. So we look at their employee benefits, make sure we're maximizing those. Planning for education, that's a big one. A lot of people wait until their kids are 12, 14, and then they I should probably start looking at planning for college. But at that point, it's a little too late. If we can start earlier, it helps significantly. So pretty much anything that impacts your life from a financial perspective, whether it's budgeting, cash flow management, am I saving enough, to go defining those goals. Because, for you and I, we're young still. So the concept of retirement is tough to picture.
Sure.
But we start having conversations of what that could look like and what would you want it to look like. So now we're planning with purpose as opposed to just doing a bunch of different things.
Yeah, that's great. That makes sense. Okay, so now it's time for the hot seat, which is a few quick questions for you to get to know you a little bit more on a personal level. We've learned obviously a lot now about what you do professionally and why. So if you want to start with what show are you currently watching?
All right. So I just wrapped up Homeland.
Okay.
8 seasons in, finally done. And so I just started Billions.
Billions. Okay, got it.
Yeah, great Showtime show. Kind of ties in a little bit with our profession, but at a much higher level. So really entertaining.
And so you've already made it through Tiger King then, I assume?
Yeah, Tiger King was an early adopter to the Tiger King craze. It was, that was something.
It's an experience, right?
It's an experience. That's it.
If you had a few hours to yourself on any given weekend, what are you doing with your free time?
Yeah, so like you, I've got two young kids, so finding a few hours is difficult these days. But if I have that time, I'm either golfing. I like to golf. I'm not great, but I like to golf. Or I brew beer, so I will also spend that time brewing some beer as well. Or just visiting a brewery. Can't quite do that right now, but I do like to try different things. So,
what's your favorite type of beer?
Ooh, that's hard to say. It changes based on the season. I like anything aged in a bourbon barrel, usually. But I drink everything from your IPAs to your stouts to, I am agnostic really when it comes to beer.
Got it. What's the one book that you recommend the most?
Yeah, so I recommend to friends, family, clients. It's called The Investment Answer, written by Dan Goldie and Gordon Murray. Really easy read. It talks a lot about what I talked about earlier, about things, focusing on what you can control, avoiding the media. And so it's probably the number one book I recommend and or give out.
Got it. Awesome. I'll have to check that out. And we'll put that in the show notes too for people to check out if they want. What are your 3 favorite podcasts?
Yeah. So I would say I'm very razor focused on becoming a better version of myself as an advisor and as a coach to people. So, being a student of the business, my podcasts are you look at my podcast lineup and it's very business heavy, but I listen to Michael Kitces, Financial Advisor Success Podcast. The guy is brilliant. He just, I feel like he makes me a better advisor. XYPN Radio is a spinoff almost of his. It's done by Alan Moore, and it's a lot of just young advisors like myself across the country, and just talking about what they're seeing in their practices. And then I'm a big fan of Gary Vee. So he's usually always up in the queue as far as something I'm listening to. So those are probably my top 3 right now.
Awesome. And you want to share with us where our listeners can find you online if they're interested in learning more about you or following you? Yeah.
So I am in the process right now of rebuilding our website. But once that's done, it's going to be KeystoneFinancialPartners.com. In the meantime, you can also go and check out WealthWisePlanning.com. There's some good information there about the young professional platform that we have. And as always, I'm on LinkedIn and your typical social media platforms, so I can make sure we get those over to you for the show notes.
Awesome. And y'all are in Cary, right? In Crescent Green?
Yeah, we're in Cary. We're not too far, actually, not too far from your new office.
Right.
We used to be really close at the old office. So, yeah, right in Cary, right behind Lucky 32.
Awesome. Well, great, Chris. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for being on our show. Any parting words?
Listen, I think if you've listened all the way through, I think the one thing I can leave you on is stay the course, follow the plan, and tune out the noise.
That's awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Paul. Really appreciate it.
That's it for this week's episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. We'll see you all next time.